Welcome to the future. PBS Digital.
California, a dream and a promise. A place of diversity and innovation. An Ellis Island for the 21st century. Today, Californians find themselves in a battlefield of conflicting needs and diminishing resources, transforming and reinventing the American dream.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next mayor of Los Angeles and a great leader for our party and for our country, Antonio Villaraigosa.
I believe in this great city because, Senator, people come here not just because of this great air and this great beautiful sky and the beautiful climate. They come here because this is the city of America's hope. This is the city of its future. Make no mistake about it. Make no mistake about it. We come from every corner of the United States here. We come from every corner of the earth here. We come here with our hopes and dreams, believing that if we work hard and play by the rules, that our family will have a better life.
In 2005, Antonio Villaraigosa, born in East LA, became the first Latino to become mayor of Los Angeles in more than 130 years. To many, Villaraigosa's victory represents the rebirth of a political legacy begun by former Mayor Tom Bradley, who set in motion the complex interplay of race, immigration, and coalition politics which transformed Los Angeles. Our story begins in 1969 when the campaign between two-term Mayor Sam Yorty and challenger Tom Bradley would define the future of Los Angeles.
In '69 was tumultuous times across the nation and certainly in Los Angeles. The Vietnam War is raging. We've got Richard Nixon. We have assassinations. The elements of fear were still out there.
Remember, we had the Watts riots of 1965, which entirely polarized the city along racial lines. Race relations between African Americans and whites was terrible.
Tomorrow, Los Angeles elects a mayor. Thomas Bradley, a city councilman, a Negro, is... Tom Bradley, how are you? See you.
The race between Bradley and Yorty in 1969 was really over the soul and direction of Los Angeles. Between a very conservative white candidate and an up-and-coming progressive black candidate, and it was as dirty and rough a campaign as Los Angeles had ever seen.
Sam Yorty was an old-line, traditional politician who ultimately sunk to a level of lowness to try to gain political advantage.
You believe there's a power combine of black militants, white radicals, communists manipulating Bradley's campaign?
I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I know it. It's very obvious here.
Yorty's smear campaign was successful, but Tom Bradley would not be defeated. By the next day, Bradley, the son of a sharecropper, was planning his rematch against Mayor Yorty.
Tom Bradley was not a radical. Tom Bradley was a former police officer, so I think that made white voters and Jewish voters and others feel a certain amount of comfort with him.
We are a divided city today, divided on the basis of race and religion and on the basis of neighborhood, on the basis of age. And it's about time that we begin to pull together.
What I did see, and what gave all of us a lot of optimism, was a plethora of faces, multicolored, multicultural, multi-generational, reaching out to him. He represented a new age in politics.
By the time Bradley came into politics, many people had given up hope for coalitions between black voters and white voters. So it came as a very great surprise to people that in Los Angeles, of all cities, Tom Bradley was putting together a coalition principally of blacks and whites, and among those whites, principally Jews. For people who had longed to have a voice at City Hall and had been excluded, the Bradley coalition was the greatest hope that had come along in years.
And the people of Los Angeles wanted that rematch as I look back on it. They wanted to see Tom Bradley go against Sam Yorty again. And I believe they wanted to cleanse their consciences and say, you know what, we are going to support a black man, and we're going to rise above the fear that has been thrust upon us.
Mayor Tom Bradley!
I thought it was a watershed moment for the city of LA because they proved to the rest of the nation that an African American could be elected mayor in a major city that did not have a predominant black population.
Tonight was the fulfillment of a dream, the impossible dream. The victory which has come tonight is not just a victory for Tom Bradley, not just a victory for the campaign, but a victory for progress, a victory for our children. Thank you very much. We're here to serve all of the people. We want no favoritism extended to anybody because of their power, their prestige, their influence, or their so-called connections.
Tom Bradley opened up doors to city government that never had been opened before. One of the things he instituted what we call area days, where he would spend an entire day from morning until night in a certain geographic section of the city, trying to meet with as many people or organizations as he possibly could.
Right here, they were going to build a rapid transit system, and they're going to take out a park.
Whatever the issues might have been, it didn't matter what walk of life you came from, whether you were rich and poor, or what color of your skin, he would make everybody feel comfortable.
I think every Angelino of my generation was influenced by Tom Bradley. In 1973, it was a tremendous victory for the idea that LA had to include a broader group of communities in its leadership. Tom Bradley was the first coalition builder in the city of Los Angeles.
The same year that Bradley became mayor, farm workers in California's Central Valley were organizing for their rights. Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta led the United Farm Workers Union, a movement more powerful than anyone could have imagined.
I was born and raised in the San Joaquin Valley. We were farm workers and harvesting the crop. Well, growing up, we became involved with the United Farm Workers Union led by Cesar Chavez. Those years were important lessons for me because Cesar would always educate us about self-worth. We're not the same as a tractor. We're not the same as a plow. We're human beings and we have rights, and we have a right to stand up and be heard.
The word before you is very clear. We want you to take out everybody in those fields. Wherever possible, let's make sure that the grapes turn into raisins on the vines. Let's make sure that in the boycott, if the growers sell the grapes, make sure the grapes are sold for less money than what it costs them to pick them.
The farm workers took their cause from the fields to the cities and called for a national boycott of grapes. California's migrant workers became the new civil rights movement.
Early in 1970, people were not buying California grapes because the grape boycott really started to take strong effect across the country. And I remember when they signed the collective bargaining agreement for the farm workers, the grower that we worked for called us all into a meeting, and he says, we have no choice but to put the damn black bird on the box. Someone in the back of the crowd yelled, "Viva Chavez!" And we all started celebrating and hugging each other, "Viva Chavez!" And we threw our hats in the air. But on that day, we became members of the United Farm Workers Union. Most of the Latino political leadership in California greatly influenced by the United Farm Workers Union. We had a strong bond, a strong relationship, given the principles that Cesar taught us. Is that every day we have to wake up and organize, organize, organize.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time
You're about to experience one of the most varied and vital cities in the United States.
We hope you have a wonderful time at the games.
Los Angeles is a city of dreams and dream makers. In the minds of millions of people worldwide, the image of America and Americans was created right here in Hollywood. But LA is also a pioneer in high technology, aerospace.
I think most people thought the Olympics was the high point of his administration. When Tom Bradley was elected, most people did not view Los Angeles as a major city as they did New York and Chicago. His vision not only was to have a downtown, but a skyline and a vibrant business community and a vibrant entertainment community and a vibrant sports community. He really wanted to build up downtown LA to make Los Angeles a first-rate city. That was number one. Number two, I believed in his effort to build up the city, he wanted to make sure minorities and people of color were involved, not only in city government, but in the construction of this new city. I believe in his mind, he felt if he built up the downtown, the urban core, that would generate jobs for people who lived in East LA and South LA, principally Latinos and African Americans who were part of the working class.
The 1980s were the best of times and the worst of times for Tom Bradley. He was very popular. Downtown was booming. The Olympics were a great success. But there were serious fiscal problems for the city. Prop 13 passed in 1978, and within 2 years, city services were being terribly strained. Choices had to be made that were very unpopular. Cutbacks in parks, cutbacks in libraries, and whether they could afford police officers. And these are the lifeblood of a city.
Proposition 13, the statewide taxpayer revolt, froze property taxes, which cut funding available to the city. Then a nationwide recession further undermined the economic stability of Los Angeles.
We used to have U.S. Steel and Tire in South LA. We used to have Bethlehem Steel that was in South LA. We had General Motors that was in South LA and in the Valley. So all of a sudden these plants were closing, and in many cases not only were they leaving the state of California, they were leaving the United States of America. No jobs, no tax base, and that led to the decline, to me, of the overall quality of life.
You had roughly about 2 million people leaving California in the early mid-1990s. Disproportionately white, disproportionately working class, a lot of them unionized in the great aerospace factories. The closing and the decimation of manufacturing in Los Angeles essentially meant not that the bottom fell out of the Los Angeles economy, but that the middle fell out of the Los Angeles economy. Los Angeles is a city that's profoundly invisible to itself. And the fact that there's this whole stratum of people working for poverty-level wages, largely immigrant, this takes years for Angelenos to come to realize.
Los Angeles became the nation's largest city with the greatest divide between rich and poor. Thousands of new Latino and Asian immigrants flocked to Los Angeles in search of the American dream, and instead found jobs in a fast-growing service and manufacturing economy dependent on low-wage workers. Many were undocumented immigrants, vulnerable and easily exploited. In 1987, this was about to change. Maria Elena Durazo, the daughter of farm workers, came to Los Angeles in 1977 to work in immigrant rights. She became a lawyer and took a job as an organizer with the Hotel and Restaurant Employees Union.
Mario! Come here, let's see if you remember this part of history.
Which part?
When I first ran for president of the union.
Yeah, we were walking around.
We would go to the hotels. There was some early mornings in there, huh?
Oh, yeah. That was, my first preschool was picket lines, 4:30 in the morning, 5 in the morning.
The strikes. You remember the strikes I used to go to with me?
That was my preschool.
The job started out as a dream come true.
These are immigrant workers, they're Latinos, they're in a service jobs, and I was really excited by it.
But she soon found that the union leadership was out of touch with the new immigrant workforce.
It was just the opposite of what a union is supposed to be about. For example, the union office would close down at 4 p.m. The housekeepers, all women, all Latinas, and African Americans, they got off of work at 4 p.m. So if they wanted to meet with the union reps, they couldn't do it. And the materials were all done in English. How can you do that when 75% of the members spoke Spanish? I set out and I said, we got to do something about it. So I decided to run, for president of the local, and I had nothing. But I called upon some friends, and we started putting together a little campaign. It was really tough.
The union leadership challenged the legitimacy of the election and sent in one of their staff, a former organizer with the United Farm Workers of America.
Well, I came here because the National Union sent me in here to take over the union. That there was this rebellion within the union led by this rebel-rouser named Maria Durazo.
We ran an election, and we were sure we had won. So who gives him or anybody the right to come in and take that election away from us?
And so I got sent in here and was immediately picketed by Maria Durazo.
And I was suspicious of Miguel, and he was trying to win me and others over so that we could have one single program. Well, it took a bit, but we did. We eventually, he won me over onto the union's program to build that local, and then eventually, sometime later, won me over, and, I couldn't resist his good looks. So we became partners.
And so Maria Elena comes into Local 11 with a mandate to put the union back in touch with its members, to open it up to these immigrants. Maria Elena and the local is kind of a harbinger of changes to come.
Our union has gone through many, many, many battles. Here's this incredible challenge of what this union could be.
How many of you reject the hotel's proposal?
The Hyatt was our first lengthy fight. The workers, certainly their morale was fading. It was very difficult to sustain. You felt like we were never gonna win it. We had to keep on going. We had to build up their confidence and get them back on track. So we called upon Reverend James Lawson and Cesar Chavez.
Compañeros, si miramos en nuestras propias historia, cuando la libertad de este país se ganó con George Washington, eran unos cuantos gatos. No eran muchos. Los demás estaban allá sentados, apoyamos, pero allá, y eran unos cuantos. Y a esos cuantos, quiero hablar con ustedes hoy, porque aquí entre ustedes hay esos cuantos.
Cesar, of course, referred to how important those workers were and that they were very special. Even Lawson referring to what it took to sustain the civil rights movement in spite of the violence, in spite of what appeared to be setbacks.
Just a concluding word then about one of the struggles that really changed
Just the commitment to it was what finally desegregated the South. And here he was, speaking in English, telling these stories about the civil rights movement to 90% Spanish-speaking workers. And I was so excited that we were doing something that he had talked about before with me, which was connecting the dots.
Maria Lane and Local 11 were important because they called attention to the new Los Angeles. She gets out there first saying, yes, we can represent and organize immigrants. She gets out there first pointing to this great gap in Los Angeles between rich and poor. And she gets out there first in pointing the way for unions to eventually amass enough power to begin to change the city. Los Angeles, in its major office buildings, had a unionized, largely African-American janitorial workforce straight through the mid-1980s. And then the people who run these janitorial services companies essentially let go of their African-American janitors, and for about 55% of what they were paying them, they hired these immigrant workers.
In 1990, these immigrant janitors would stand up for their rights in a campaign called Justice for Janitors. They called a strike for better wages in prestigious Century City. No one was prepared for what would happen next.
We have a legal right to march on the sidewalk, and we're going to march on the sidewalk.
In 1992 in Los Angeles, there was clearly a sense, if you were doing any kind of organizing, that there was something very wrong building up in the city. The poverty, the wealth, it just was becoming much, much more crystallized, more polarized at that point.
Tom Bradley had been mayor for nearly 20 years, but the world-class city he envisioned was coming apart at the seams. The flashpoint was the African-American and Latino community of South Los Angeles, bordering downtown.
We are determined to take back the streets of this community for the law-abiding people who live here, who work here, who play here.
Gang violence, police abuse, crack cocaine, and pervasive unemployment were tearing apart the community. Local residents were concerned that the alarming number of liquor stores in residential neighborhoods were adding fuel to the fire.
When you have merchants who, in order to make a profit, sell alcohol to minors, allow drug trafficking to take place, you have the store owner that's going to put a couch in the parking lot so people can sit there and loiter, the drug dealer that comes by, fights that occur because people are drinking. You compromise the quality of life in residential areas.
We cannot accept that the only way to make a profit in South Central Los Angeles is through the sale of legal and illegal drugs.
We launched a campaign to either clean up or close down the liquor stores.
Liquor stores and neighborhood markets in South LA that used to be owned by African Americans in the 60s and 70s, all of a sudden were being sold to Koreans in the late 80s and early 90s. My parents owned a market and liquor store in South LA for many years and wanted to stay there, but basically were bought out by Korean merchants.
The problems that the liquor stores were causing in the early 80s were the same problem as they were causing in the early 90s. Race was not an issue. So what we did was we went out and talked to Korean activists that we knew, because clearly there would be racial implications immediately.
That's actually how I came to meet Karen Bass, because she was leading an effort to reduce the overconcentration of liquor stores in the area. But she also knew that the issue couldn't be racialized. From the Korean immigrants' perspective, they are just trying to stay out of people's way and just try to make a buck and send their children to school in pursuit of the American dream. It's very, very different for them. There's vast diversity. Many immigrants will come to Los Angeles, settle into pockets of the community where it's relatively low income, working class communities in central Los Angeles, and do business in South Los Angeles. And they'd often remark by saying that they expected Los Angeles and America to be full of white people, but they don't see any white people where they're living. And so they're trying to figure out what their place is.
You have two entirely different cultures thrust together, coupled with, you go around the store to buy something and you spend your money, and the guy that you're buying it from, in many cases, a lot of people thought, treated you with no respect.
There was a lot of misunderstandings because of language and cultural barriers. And this had been brewing probably for about 7 or 8 years.
Then in 1991, black motorist Rodney King was beaten by 4 white police officers. 13 days later, an African-American teenager was killed by a Korean store owner. Black and Korean activists mobilized to diffuse the anger.
And I give the Korean community, the African-American community, a lot of credit to try and do this. I mean, it was just much larger than people could get a handle on it.
Nearly 1 year later, the officers went on trial for the beating of Rodney King.
Not guilty of the crime of assault by force likely to produce great bodily
I was shocked, I was stunned, I had my breath taken away by the verdict that was announced.
Once the verdict came down, the reaction was so swift, people had already started rioting and looting, and once it started, it just took off.
No justice, no peace! No justice, no peace!
People were out, everybody was out on the street, in the balconies and the fire escapes. I mean, people were angry. I never would have guessed that over 700 businesses would be lost, and that number of families would lose their livelihood.
The civil unrest of 1992 was a low point for the Bradley administration. And I believe he thought under his leadership something like that could never happen. I don't fault him entirely for it, but I think you have to fault everyone who was in a leadership position for basically letting down the city. I just don't know that he really understood the depth of the anger that was resonating at the grassroots level in the city of LA at that particular time.
I think there was a lot of pent-up anger on the part of poor and low-income residents of this city who felt like we were living in this mecca of wealth, and there was splendor all around them, and you couldn't touch it and you couldn't taste it. So I saw it much more as an economic unrest than a police unrest. I think that there was a general belief that things were not going to get better quickly.
When the fires were put out, people were on the street trying to clean up. People were feeding folks. They were housing, giving clothes away. And there were a series of community meetings. And very interesting to us, almost in all of the meetings in the South LA area, the question of what was going to happen to these liquor stores came up. We felt that we had to rise to the occasion.
When a particular owner
That we were going to have to build a movement to prevent these stores from opening up, but we were going to have to do it in a way that we didn't allow it to deteriorate into a racial conflict.
They stopped the rebuilding of 150 problem liquor stores and supported the development of 44 new businesses.
I think for the vast majority of Korean Americans in Los Angeles, they understood two major lessons coming out of the civil unrest. One was that you can't be politically isolated, that you have to participate in the civic life of this city if you're going to be heard, if your interests are going to be represented adequately. But secondly, in order for American life to be meaningful to you, diversity is a very important principle. Being able to relate with other people, and like myself, really try to figure out for themselves, where do they fit in American society?
Los Angeles would be at a crossroads of uncertainty when the city faced a new election for mayor in 1993. Tom Bradley did not seek re-election to a sixth term.
If we were going to design the expected person to take Tom Bradley's place at mayor, it would have been Mike Wu, a young Asian American city councilman, able to take the biracial Bradley coalition and make it multiracial for a new age. And instead, something quite different happened. A Republican businessman named Richard Riordan comes in out of nowhere, apparently, with a lot of resources, and is able to win the mayor's office.
I think people had lost their confidence, and they wanted somebody they envisioned as strong. I mean, our motto was, Riordan, tough enough to turn Los Angeles around. It was a time, I think, when people were willing to vote for a rich white Republican, even though they were 75% Democrat.
So the mayor was saying this is a frightening place to be. The city is scary, and I'm going to protect you. I'm tough enough to turn LA around. So it was not a hopeful time.
If you want someone to do something socially, economically, politically, you scare them. And then the most visible change tends to be immigrants. In the middle of all this, you had a real estate downturn and a recession. But what we saw was a very anti-immigrant era. And politically, it manifested itself with Proposition 187, Proposition 209, Proposition 227, so much so that the Latino community felt under attack and being scapegoated for the state's problems.
Republican Pete Wilson was running for re-election for governor of California and seized upon these fears to his political advantage.
His polls were down, and he discovered that he could win votes by advocating a measure called Proposition 187, which would deny public services to undocumented residents in California. And it hit a nerve with California voters. It passed overwhelmingly and re-elected Pete Wilson.
What I saw when 187 came about was this concern, this fear by the mainstream that the color and the character of the state and the place was changing.
Antonia Hernandez led the first case, which successfully challenged Proposition 187 in the federal courts, where it was declared unconstitutional. It was never enacted.
I have a speech, and it's thank you, Governor Pete Wilson. Thank you for scaring the bejiggers out of our community. If you were a legal resident and you didn't become a citizen, then you better become a citizen. And if you were a citizen, you better vote, because till we had a political voice that represented our interest and protected our interest, we were going to be a community that would be stepped on.
LA is an area where immigrant rights is a major issue for workers, right? And we knew that we had to readjust the labor movement to align ourselves so that we would be advocates for issues that are important to the Latino community. So we aligned ourselves in to be advocates for immigration reform, for legalization, for rights on the job.
The history of the labor in this country is about immigrant rights, whether it be the Jewish...
Miguel Contreras becomes head of the Los Angeles County Federation of Labor in 1996, and he realizes that he can not only politicize and activate his own members, but that he has a unique opportunity to politically activate this whole immigrant community. And in election after election, he proves that indeed can be done.
We have this vast army of activists, many of them who are immigrant workers.
Okay, le tengo una información, por favor.
And a lot of them come out and walk precincts with us to make sure to get the vote. They don't have to be citizens to help get out the vote. What matters is that they care about this country.
Lo quiero decir que salga a votar. This is Paula. Have you got out the vote yet?
Okay. Way back in the early 70s, you could count the number of people who we considered our friends in elected offices on one hand. There wasn't very many of them. And so the idea of getting behind candidates who will be friendly to working families has always been a key issue. What policies do we create that is really going to make a change in working families here in the city of LA? How is it that we give them hope that they too can have a piece of the American dream?
We had to make a change in Los Angeles that would connect the struggles, that would be bigger, that would be progressive, that would change the landscape, change the politics, just change the way that workers and working families were treated.
Maria Elena Durazo made a decision with far-reaching implications. Her union, Local 11, would provide seed money for a new organization, the Los Angeles Alliance for a New Economy, known as Lyn. It would be a think tank with a practical agenda, changing public policy to benefit low-wage workers.
Our concept was to build an institution that had real research capacity, that could advocate for policies at the local and regional level, that could build coalitions, that brought together the labor movement with the environmental movement, with community organizations, with open-minded, far-sighted businesses, really put forward a new framework for the kind of Los Angeles we want to see.
Their vision was tested when Mayor Reardon contracted out airport service jobs to private firms who lowered wages. Lyn organized the campaign which led to the living wage. It was a simple concept and a big fight. Living wage called on businesses who contracted with the city to provide workers with wages nearly double the minimum. City Councilwoman Jackie Goldberg championed the cause.
Living wage is the notion that a person who works full-time should be able to live in that community where they work on what they've earned. That's why minimum wage is not enough, because you can't live on minimum wage in Los Angeles.
All right, Ms. Goldberg, you have the floor.
Thank you. This is about the city as employer. This is about the workers who clean the libraries, bathrooms, and floors. This is about the people who clean the airport and the harbor.
Lyn formed a coalition of community organizations, clergy, and labor to lobby the city council to make the living wage law. It would become a national model.
Every council member was visited by his or own clergy member if they were in any way connected to a church or a synagogue. There were petition drives, there were letter campaigns. People went to the media. The coalition that came to support living wage was really magnificent.
But opposition loomed from powerful business interests and the mayor.
I strongly believe in a living wage. I think people should have access to jobs, quality jobs that pay them enough that they can be independent. And certainly a minimum wage does not make you an independent person. But I think that when government starts to dictate this, specifically when they dictate it where it only involves people who take money from government, that it becomes artificial and dangerous. It's almost socialistic. It's scary. Some companies will have to shut down because they can't compete.
To the extent that these provisions cause any business to decide against moving into Los Angeles or expanding, then in our view, the price is too high.
It would be great if everyone could make $50 an hour. It would be great if everybody could make $90,000 a year. Why not? Why not? Because people are paid according to skill level, educational background, and because if you impose too many costs and requirements on somebody who is investing their own capital, they won't invest.
Obviously, we want growth, we want job creation, we want good things to happen, and we want people to have a fair return and all that. But we also want to keep our eye on the prize, which is the alleviation of poverty and the creation of good jobs and affordable housing. We have a shared responsibility for our collective prosperity.
We're talking about just treating the low end more, a little more, like we treat the high end.
Tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Bingo. Unanimous vote again.
Yes.
Oh, I will never forget the day that the motion passed. It was like a city mobilizing to say we don't want to do business as usual.
The first big test of living wage would be a major new development designed to revive Hollywood. The developer wanted $90 million in subsidies from the city and had to negotiate with city councilwoman Jackie Goldberg.
Jackie had laid out a case to the business community. We want to ensure these are good jobs. We want to ensure they're jobs for local folks. We want to ensure that folks have a right to organize into a union successfully. Job training, other community benefits. If we can negotiate that package, we'll do whatever it takes to get this project approved.
It's now part of the accepted process of how projects get developed in Los Angeles that this dialogue takes place. And I think that's a good thing. It makes the project better, and ultimately, you know, what we have to get measured not just by the economic success of the project, but how does it enrich the life of the community?
If you fast forward America, it will. I mean, it's a demographic reality that it will be majority minority. What that means is that white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant and Catholics, but Europeans will be less than 50% of the population. How Los Angeles responds to the incredible immigration and diversity that exists is going to be a model for the United States. How we create a stable transition is critically important to the incorporation of immigrants and minorities into the political, social, and economic system of the United States.
Maria Elena Durazo believes that unions enable immigrant workers to earn their way into the middle class. Since 1987, she has led her union time and time again in the fight to protect and advance wages and working conditions.
What these hotels are looking for is poverty in our communities. Because when they don't pay good wages, there's poverty in Los Angeles.
For the last 4 months, the union has been in contract negotiations. The hotels have declared an impasse, and Local 11 brought their case to the public.
Every day I clean 15 rooms. In each room, this is what I do. I make the beds.
I strip the bed of all the dirty linen. I bundle the dirty linen.
Housekeepers, dishwashers, cooks, and bellmen. Our single purpose is to build a movement of workers. They are the leaders. They're the ones who are winning their respect.
I sweat all day long, running from bed to bed and room to room. If I need more time to finish my rooms, I have two options. I either don't take any breaks or I risk discipline.
Section 409 of the Penal Code prohibits unlawful assembly. If you remain in the area, regardless of your purpose, you will be in violation of Section 409. You may be arrested. Any police action may include the use of less lethal munitions, which could cause serious injury to those.
Aquí, con ganas de seguirle. No vuelvan, le dije, sí vamos a volver a estar aquí adentro con ustedes.
Vamos a volver otra vez.
I felt really different today than what I felt 10 years ago. There are so many more workers who were so confident about defending and demanding their rights.
Yo no tengo miedo, pero sí me siento como emocionada, ¿verdad? Porque de que uno está participando en algo justo.
Estamos pidiendo dignidad y respeto. Respeto para los trabajadores y respeto para las familias de esos trabajadores. Porque mis hijos van a ir y van a un colegio por lo que gana su mamá y su papá.
Cuando todos mis compañeros me aplaudían, esa era una muestra de que todos estamos unidos y todos estamos listos y preparados para lo que venga, para seguir luchando por mejorar el futuro de nuestra familia.
De la manera como ellos van a escuchar nuestras voces.
Vamos a seguir hasta que nos den lo que nosotros merecemos.
We want real solutions and deep thought. The leaders of this city, business, union, all leaders have got to look at good paying jobs in order to have a healthy city. And that the healthy city has to be for everybody.
Quiero que nadie de ustedes dejen a nada ni a nadie que nos detenga. Nosotros tenemos el poder de convencerles de que tienen que salir a votar, porque no importa quién salga de alcalde, tienen que respetar nuestro pueblo, el inmigrante, el trabajador, el conserje, el jardinero, el lavaplatos, no importa, todos tenemos dignidad y por eso ellos tienen que salir a votar.
The mayor's race is in full swing, and Antonio Villaraigosa faces off for a second time against incumbent Mayor James Hahn. It is a bitterly fought election which will test the politics of race, ethnicity, and coalitions in ways reminiscent of the campaigns of Tom Bradley.
Los Angeles leaders have to be coalition builders. And Los Angeles, the most diverse city in the United States and indeed the world, has to be a place where communities are working together, where their leaders are creating the dialogue and the bridge between those communities to effectively lead Los Angeles.
I think, based on conversations I've had and observations I've made, finally African Americans are going to vote in large numbers for a Latino candidate. That has not happened before because of the historical tension between African Americans and Latinos. Many African Americans view Latino gains often at their expense.
And all I ask you, take a good look at me. Take a good look at who I am. I want to be a mayor for all of us. A great city is a city where we're growing and prospering together. Make no mistake about it. I'm gonna work for that.
This is the first time I've seen the African American Latino communities come together in a citywide coalition.
Victory's close. You guys watching the returns? You see what the vote is? We're way ahead and somebody's not gonna catch up.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a historic night in our city and in our country. Welcome the next mayor of Los Angeles, my brother Antonio Villaraigosa.
You all know that I love LA, but tonight I really love LA. So let's declare our purpose here and now. Our purpose is to bring this great city together. Our purpose is to draw fully and equally on the rich diversity of all our communities and neighborhoods. Together, we can make a difference to make this city the city that it can be. God bless you. God bless Los Angeles. Thank you so much.
Villaraigosa's victory is the realization of a new balance of power, a multi-ethnic coalition befitting the diversity and vision of a new Los Angeles. The city of America's promise and the city of the American dream. California and the American Dream was made possible by the Ford Foundation, Native American Public Telecommunications. Additional funding provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.